So, continuing with my series of watching the Star Wars original trilogy theatrical, like unspecialized editions, I was on to Empire Strikes Back last night, and I mentioned in my video about 4K 77 that I wasn't really sure which version I was going to do for Empire, because unlike A New Hope and Return of the Jedi, there wasn't like a clear option to go with, because the people who did 4K 77 and 4K 83, New Hope and Return of the Jedi, my understanding is that they've started Empire Strikes Back, which is going to be 4K 80, but it's only in a beta right now. And I think you have to be like a patron or something to have access to it. So I do not have access to it. I will review it once it actually completely comes out, obviously. But in the meantime, I'm a completionist. So I did a bit of looking, and I narrowed it down between, I think it was a version of Hermes Despecialized, I think. It was something like that. Which was, I kind of forget because I don't have it, like, the description on me, but I'm pretty sure it was essentially a film scan, a Blu-ray scan, a DVD scan, and it was, like, recreated from, like, the ground up, basically. Completely re-editing Empire Strikes Back into as close as you can get to the theatrical version without using a film reel. So I was thinking about doing that one, but the deal breaker for me was it was only in 720p, but the file was also like 20 gigs, so it doesn't really make sense to me that the movie is 20 gigs, but it's only in 720p, so I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. If any of you guys have more information, please let me know in the comments, or other possible alternatives for Empire Strikes Back. Please let me know. I'm pretty new to this, but I ended up watching D+80, which I can't even attempt to pronounce the name of the guy who made this. I'm really sorry, but I'll leave all of this stuff in the description if you want to check it out. But on originaltrilogy.com, the basic, they list the sources as the 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, which was used as the primary source for the project, and then two 35mm theatrical prints were also used to restore the original shots where needed, and it was all scanned and cleaned at 4K. Let's see. Okay, yeah, here's the basic blurb that they wrote. They say, and I quote, "Theatrical, but not completely theatrical. I restored most of the original 1980 shots of the film, removing most of the CGI and other unnecessary changes. My preference was quality over authenticity, though. My intent was to keep it as theatrical as possible, but I'm willing to sacrifice some authenticity for quality, so some creative license was used in this process. It's theatrical in spirit." So that's what they said. And I think that's a pretty damn good description of the project, because it isn't like a film scan. Like, when 4K 80 comes out, that will be a completely authentic film scan at 4K, which is why I'm really excited for that, because the only way to get a more authentic version is to get a time machine and go back to 1980. But this was the best I could do, and this one is actually in 4K, so, and I believe the file size was 50 something gigs, I want to say, which is definitely a decent bit smaller than 4K 77 and 4K 83, each of which are about 70. So you save about 20 gigs there. I have no doubt that 4K 80 is probably going to be around the 70 mark too. And I should note that this D+80 version that I watched, I believe it has multiple versions, or like updates. If you're like at all diving into this stuff, you'll kind of see that there are different versions of all this stuff. Like even 4K 77 has different versions. I believe I watched version 2. I can't confirm that because I don't have my computer on me right now, but I'm pretty sure that's the version I watched. But yeah, the color was amazing. And I imagine that's because, like they said, it's sourced. One of the main sources was the 4K Ultra HD BluRay, and that has HDR. So I'm guessing that that's where all the color comes from. Now this D+80 is not an HDR, so you can watch this on like any screen without it looking like washed out. Because I learned the hard way that if you watch an HDR file on a non-HDR screen, the color doesn't look good. But this doesn't have that issue because the actual file isn't in HDR, but it's sourced from a file with HDR. So I think that's at least partially why the color is so good. And also because it's at a higher resolution, higher bitrate. I have no idea what the native bitrate was. I already forgot what it was, but it was pretty high. If I had to guess, it was probably around 60 megabytes per second. Don't quote me on that though. I have no idea unless maybe the website says. Doesn't look like it. I don't know. It was pretty high bitrate though. In terms of what I noticed, I didn't notice as many like changes between like the Disney Plus Blu-ray version to this as I did with A New Hope. And I think that's probably because A New Hope had the most changes. The changes I did notice in Empire though was they brought back the original Emperor in that hologram scene where Vader's talking to the Emperor. It wasn't the Ian McDiarmid replacement that they did. It was the original one. I don't remember the actor who did it, but it was the original one. I'm like 90% sure they brought back the original Boba Fett actor. I'm almost certain it wasn't Tamora Morrison. Because I'm pretty sure they replaced him with Tamora Morrison in the special edition. I could be wrong though, but I'm like 90% sure that this was like a different guy and the original guy. And then there was some stuff in Cloud City that was different from the Disney Plus Blu-ray. So that was cool. But honestly, other than that, I didn't really notice that much. And to be fair, I'm not really as familiar with the changes in like the theatrical version of Empire versus the special edition, besides the stuff I just listed. So maybe there were some changes that just went over my head because I didn't notice them. And it's not like I watch Star Wars all the time. I mean, it's like my favorite movie series, but I only watch it like once a year. Like once a year I'll do like a marathon. Because as much as I love Star Wars, it's not the most rewatchable in my opinion. But anyway, that's getting off topic. But yeah, if I really enjoyed this. This was my favorite version of Empire Strikes Back that I've ever seen. But I kind of struggle to recommend it honestly because it's a lot of work to. I mean, it was less work than 4K 77 and 4K 83, but you still have to put in a bit of effort to get it up. And honestly, there aren't, in my opinion, enough changes to justify going through the effort of getting it. Now, that being said, now that I have the file and, I can watch it whenever, this will be my go-to version of Empire Strikes Back until 4K 80 comes out. But that's because I already went through the effort of getting the file. So I don't have to, do the hard work again. But especially if you're not that tech savvy or not like as big of a mega fan, although I have a feeling if you're watching this video, you're probably a fan of Star Wars. So I don't know. I mean, if you're looking for the most authentic version of Empire Strikes Back, this is not it. But if you're looking for something that's close and you don't mind spending the time to get it up and running, which this isn't going to be a tutorial for it because I don't want to risk any gray area stuff with Disney. But I'm sure you can find a video on ways to get it. But yeah, I did enjoy it, and I might recommend it to like a mega fan. But honestly, if you're not a mega fan or don't want to put in the time and effort for this, I would say you're probably fine just watching the Disney Plus version or the Blu-ray or the DVD or whatever version you already have. Because as cool as this was, and as this was the best version of Empire I've ever seen, I don't think it quite justifies the ends. But yeah, that's all for this one. The 4K 83 review will come in a few days, so stay tuned for that.